Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to talk about a war that's been raging for over 100 years, right inside our classrooms, shaping millions of young minds. It's a conflict fought not with armies, but with ideas. And the battleground? It's the simple act of learning to read.
So let's kick things off with a question that, honestly, seems so simple on the surface, but its history is surprisingly complex and, believe it or not, deeply controversial. As you're about to see, the answer is anything but straightforward. And believe it or not, that one question has kicked off what educators call the reading wars, a really high-stakes, century-long battle over what is arguably the most critical skill we teach. Okay, so to really get what this is all about, you gotta meet the two opposing armies. In one corner, you've got phonics, and in the other, you've got whole language, and their core beliefs about how we learn to read could not be more different.
You know, the crazy thing is, this whole 100-year war, it really just boils down to one single, fundamental disagreement. The whole language side believes reading is natural, that kids will just kind of pick it up if you surround them with good books, but the phonics side says, no way. Reading is an invention, a complex code that has to be cracked, and it must be taught explicitly.
And this table, it just lays out the battle lines perfectly. Phonics is bottom-up. It starts with the code, the letters, the sounds, and the mantra is, sound it out. Whole language is top-down. It's all about meaning first, encouraging kids to guess a new word based on pictures or the context of the sentence. So for decades, this war just raged on. It was all based on philosophy, on what people thought worked in the classroom. The pendulum just kept swinging back and forth. But then, an impartial judge walked into the room, and you couldn't argue with this one. I'm talking about brain science.
And wow, did science deliver a blow right out of the gate. This quote from cognitive scientist Keith Stanovich just nails it. Researchers confirmed it. We are absolutely hardwired for spoken language, but reading, that's a human invention, a very recent one. We are not born with a reading center just waiting to be activated. Reading is not natural.
So what does that actually mean? It means learning to read literally rewires our brains. It's this incredible feat of neural engineering. The brain uses a process they call cortical recycling. It basically hijacks areas that were designed for other things, like recognizing faces or objects, and builds brand new connections to create a dedicated reading circuit.
So how does the brain pull this off? Well, it basically builds a brand new neural superhighway. It all starts in our visual cortex, where we see the letters. Then it zips over to a special area called the letterbox, which gets really good at recognizing letters and letter patterns. And from there, it forges these high-speed connections to the parts of our brain that handle sound and meaning.
You see, for the longest time, the whole idea behind look-say and whole language was that we just memorize words by their shape. Like we recognize a stop sign or a picture of an apple.
Yeah, turns out neuroscience proved that was completely wrong. Our brain's letterbox isn't a picture album at all. It's a super powerful code breaker. It uses a process called orthographic mapping to instantly connect the sequence of letters in a word to its sounds. That's how we build that massive library of sight words, not by memorizing shapes, but by mapping sounds to letters.
And scientists, they boiled all this complexity down into this beautifully simple formula. Reading comprehension equals decoding times language comprehension. Now that little X, the multiplication sign, that's the most important part. Because if your decoding skill is 0, it doesn't matter how great your language comprehension is. 0 times anything is still 0. You absolutely have to have both.
So with this mountain of evidence just piling up, the U.S. Congress decided to do something pretty much unheard of. They brought together a massive panel to review over 100,000 studies to finally settle this debate with hard evidence, not just philosophy.
And the verdict? It was crystal clear. The panel came back with these 5, think of them as the non-negotiable pillars of reading. And they found solid evidence that systematic phonics, actually teaching the code, isn't just a nice idea. They called it an essential part of a successful classroom reading program.
So what this all showed was that the entire war was based on a false choice. It was never phonics versus comprehension. What the science makes perfectly clear is that real, deep comprehension is only possible after you have effective decoding. The code is the key that unlocks the meaning.
And all of this research, this huge body of work from neuroscience, linguistics, and psychology now has a name: the science of reading. It's not a brand, it's not a specific curriculum, it's just the science. It's the evidence-based roadmap for how to teach kids to read. Okay, so
science settled it. The war should be over, right? Well, that's when a new and maybe even tougher battle began.
Look, let's be absolutely clear about this. Within the scientific community, among the neuroscientists, the cognitive psychologists who actually study this stuff for a living, there's no debate anymore about how we learn to read.
Which, of course, brings us to the million-dollar question. If we know what works, if the science is settled, why isn't this happening in every single classroom? Why are so many schools still using methods based on ideas that were disproven decades ago?
The battlefront has totally shifted. It's moved from the neuroscience lab right into the classroom, into school board meetings, and into state legislatures. The new fight, it's all about implementation. It's about getting this knowledge into the hands of teachers, into the curriculum, and into policy.
Because at the end of the day, this isn't just some abstract debate about teaching methods. The ability to read, that's the key to everything else. It's the gateway to all other learning. And getting this right is a fundamental issue of equity and social justice. It's about ensuring every single child gets the key that unlocks their own future.
And that's really the challenge we're all left with today. The war of ideas, it's over. Science won. So the real question now is, how do we make sure that victory actually makes it to every single child who is learning to read?